Hello, everybody. How's it going? So you've been listening to a piece of music that I wrote called Exigence. It is a tone poem composed for jazz big band, and it's all on YouTube. Everything's in the description. It's basically this big piece of music that I wrote for a big band with a lot of my friends and some electronic music. And I composed it in the year 2014, actually 2013 to 2014, and the concert where we performed it was at Roulette in Brooklyn. And the reason why I'm mentioning the year is because that's the year that Whiplash came out. So I was writing jazz big band music and directing a jazz big band briefly. The exact year Whiplash was coming out. I studied jazz big band composition between 2010 and 2012 at the Manhattan School of Music, which is a New York City jazz conservatory, not unlike the fictional conservatory, Schaefer Conservatory, as portrayed in the movie Whiplash. I was one of 3 people to graduate with my degree in jazz composition. The other 2 musicians are absolutely phenomenal musicians that were my classmates in my year. And after school, I went and studied at the BMI. I guess studied might not be the right word, but I participated in the BMI Jazz Composers Workshop, which was a continuing education workshop sort of thing for jazz composers in New York. And I was part of that for a couple of years. And because I was part of this BMI Jazz Composers Workshop, I got a commission to put on this piece of music that you were seeing at the beginning of this live stream, Exigence. And that's from the Jerome Fund. I'm very much thankful to the Jerome Fund for commissioning that piece of music. And I won an ASCAP Young Jazz Composers Award for that piece, and I've also won in previous years ASCAP Young Jazz Composers Awards. I'm not really trying to flex by saying all this stuff about my jazz big band career as it was, because I used to really be into jazz big band music, and I was very much part of the scene. Not so much anymore, but I'm mainly mentioning that because I feel like I'm uniquely qualified to talk about some of the cultural aspects in the movie Whiplash that other people maybe not who have had the same experience I've had, maybe they don't have that same qualification, because I have literally been Terrence Fletcher. I have directed a jazz big band before in New York City in the year 2014, the year that Whiplash came out. I have been Miles Teller. I've attended an elite jazz conservatory, whatever that means, in New York City, and I've been part of the scene, specifically the jazz scene, for the past 9 years now. So the reason why, I had a lot of the critiques of the movie Whiplash that I had, which were included in the video that's gone kind of viral because YouTube's algorithm has been pumping it and showing it to everybody for some reason. Part of the reason is because I was literally all the characters in that movie. And, for somebody who's played jazz a little bit, in high school, and they said well, what do you mean? That guy doesn't look like a jazz musician. I did this really weird, admittedly somewhat mean-spirited critique of one of the characters by saying that he looks like a high school jock and not a jazz musician. In my high school jazz band, the drummer, who was he actually went on to join the Air Force, but he was an incredible jazz musician also, and also the captain of the football team. He looked like a high school jock, but he was a great guy. And he was very much an amazing musician, but at the same time, he would not be the kind of person to go to a New York City jazz conservatory. And it seems like such a strange little detail that I picked out, that guy looks like a high school jock. But at the same time, I know my scene and I know the people that I hang out with. And a lot of the culture and a lot of the just the general vibe of the scene, it just does not look like the movie Whiplash. And I think a lot of musicians had a very emotional reaction coming out of the movie because it was portraying something so close to home in such a mean-spirited light. And, I guess the best analogy I have to describe, my thoughts for the movie Whiplash is, Whiplash is a sports film. You could just replace anything with jazz, but it was just so strange that it picked this one particular culture that doesn't have any representation in popular media and, just really delved into it. And it would be kind of like another sort of, craft or another sort of pursuit that is similarly, the people involved in it are similarly excited and intense and dedicated, like Olympic archery. So if the movie was about Olympic archery, which is something I know nothing about because there really is no representation in popular culture of Olympic archery, and the movie was about Olympic archery and the trials of Andrew Neiman, who wants to be part of the Olympic archery team, and his coach Terrence Fletcher, who wants to whip him into shape and like is abusive of his young pupil to try and get him on the like Olympic archery team. It would be the same movie. Like you could have the practice scene too, like of Miles Teller's character, like practicing shooting the bow, practicing arching, and like bleeding because he's practicing so much, and then getting so upset at himself that he's not really doing as well as he should be by breaking the bow against his like knee or whatever. Just kind of the same thing, like having Andrew Neiman like punch the snare drum. It'd be the same movie. It'd be the exact same movie. And chances are, if it was like that, I wouldn't have the same critiques as I do because I know nothing about Olympic archery. But chances are, people in the Olympic archery community would have very negative things to say about the movie because it's a fairly mean-spirited movie about a craft that has no, dedication without love, dedication without passion. And that's kind of like my reaction. That's where I was coming from with most of the movie. So, I had a lot of musician friends reach out and say they shared similar thoughts. A lot of people, especially in the New York City scene. I'd like to share an email with you guys that I got from somebody because the director Damien Chazelle of the movie Whiplash went to school in Princeton, New Jersey. He went to school at Princeton High School in New Jersey, and while he was there, he had a very particularly negative experience with the jazz program at Princeton High School. This email was sent to me. I'm not going to share the person's name, but he was describing basically what Princeton High School is like. So, hey, Adam, watched your Whiplash video, blah, blah, blah. Actually grew up in the area of Princeton High School where Damien Chazelle got his education, jazz and otherwise from, and ended up getting to know several musicians at Princeton High School, including the current director, as well as the structure of the program. Thought you'd find interesting. Princeton High School has, as you said, a very competitive jazz program. I wouldn't say band program, except they don't have a concert band, only an army of jazz ensembles. They have, I think, 6 jazz bands, top studio band with 40 members, to the runner-up jazz ensemble down the line. It seemed to me the entire program involved an external sense of competition, internal and external. There's jockeying to be the highest chair in the highest band. Then the bands as a whole run the high school jazz festival circuit to compete for the top prizes, culminating in their yearly trip to Berklee's high school jazz competition, which they seem to win every time. So basically, Damien Chazelle is making a movie about Princeton High School. That's what he's doing. He made Whiplash about his experience at Princeton High School. But instead of making it a high school jazz competition or whatever, he made it a college competition specifically in New York, like a college jazz sort of thing in New York, which would be kind of the equivalent of like if you were in a competitive archery program in high school and then expected all of your experiences in high school to match the experiences of people competing on the Olympic level. That's kind of what's going on here. He had a somewhat negative, weirdly toxic experience in high school, and he just assumed, and he just copied and pasted that to another culture, basically. And that's, I think, why so many people had such an emotional reaction to it. It just didn't feel right. It felt very not what it is. And just because I have the platform, I made the video talking about my reaction to to Whiplash. But many other musicians I know, including Rick Beato, he recently made a video talking about his reaction to it. They feel similarly. And interestingly, Rick Beato's video, when he was talking about it, he mentioned the movie Spinal Tap. And Spinal Tap, weirdly enough, I think actually captures the vibe of being a musician way better. Even though it has nothing to do with the jazz, scene in New York. It just like the general absurdity of some of it. It feels more right, weirdly, which is just so strange. But anyway, I'm going to read some more comments. I'm going to read some comments from the video and reply to them directly, just because, I can. I'm going to be pedantic. By the way, the pedantry, just me nitpicking things, I understand that's super annoying. It's like not very useful, and you can totally enjoy the movie without needing to know all these details. It's really, really dumb. I was just kind of indulging it. It was very self-indulgent exercise to really nitpick the movie Whiplash the way that I did. So I apologize for that. I really, truly do. But you can dislike the fact that I was pedantic, but I would, if you want to disagree with me, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I'm right with a lot of it. I really am. Again, weird flex, but okay. But I'm right with how I analyzed how musicians in New York City work and operate, and the culture around it, and the language around it. So, for example, this guy says some things seem extremely nitpicky, not technical music-related things, but phrasing things like saying "know by heart" instead of "memorize" being wrong. They mean the same thing, so I'm not sure why that's so important to make a point of saying use strictly one thing rather than the other. Well, think about it this way. If in an American movie you had an American say, "Oh, I need to go buy some petrol," that wouldn't faze a British person at all, but for an American, you'd be like, "Wait, what? Petrol? Okay. Yeah, petrol means the same thing as gasoline, but you wouldn't say I need to go buy some petrol if you're in America and part of that culture." So it just feels like it was just Google translated wrong. And I mean, really what it is know by heart is in reference to words. If you have words memorized, you know the words by heart. If you have music memorized, you have it memorized. There isn't a related idiom to music memorization. Maybe you can say that I have the music off book. That is something that sometimes people say, but it's a little folksy. It's a little, I guess, too niche. But if you needed an idiom to go with musical memorization. So yeah, when the guy Tanner says that he knows the music by heart, that's not what people say. It just isn't. You can fight me on that, but that's just not what people say. More comments. What's the tune in the final seconds? My band Sungazer. I finish every video with my band Sungazer's song, Sequence Start. I swear that fucking lick is annoying. All my friends do that fucking lick just to annoy me. I'm glad they do. You deserve it. I had a teacher like Fletcher in jazz school. He was terrifying, but pretty much always right. So that's a big part of the whole thing, is that the character, the archetype of Fletcher does exist to some degree, because you can have very disciplinarian-focused musicians, but the abuse, the level, is just not there. And I think that's kind of the trick with the movie, is because there is a level of verisimilitude to it. There is a level of truth to some of the things in the movie. It's not just a complete fiction, but just because it is so negatively portraying the realm of, the thing that means so much to me and the people that mean so much to me. Remember, I have been Terrence Fletcher. I have been Miles Teller. I have been all the students in that jazz band, and I am all of them, just in terms of my professional career. I am literally those people. It's, I suppose the same sort of thing as like portraying astronauts in a certain way. Like the movie Apollo 13 was done very, very well in terms of its realism, but still you could find things to nitpick there. This movie was not done nearly to that degree in terms of this professional field. So anyway, thank you for a video. Oh, here's one. You're just a cocky kid who thinks he knows all about music, when in reality, Miles actually played the drums in the movie. If you did any research, I did plenty of research. I even showed Miles Teller playing the drums in one of the clips. Didn't need any research. Also, I mean, my life is my research. Anyway, and he holds his sticks in his own way. Sure, but I didn't even critique his stick holding technique because I'm not a drummer. Like, I know drummers have complained about Miles Teller, but, by the grace of God, I hope that you die, you loser. Cool. Sweet. Just reading the comments as they go by. I'm going to get to the comments later. But yeah, movie was one of my favorite movies. You're just a hater. Movie was dope. You just embarrassed yourself. Cool. This dude's super critical, needs to lighten up a little bit. Most things that got in the movie I think were pretty accurate. Again, no, they weren't. I don't mean to appeal to authority all that much, but this is one of the very few things that I can say that I, without a shadow of a doubt, I am an authority on. It feels weird to say it that way. I honestly don't like saying, like, I'm right, you're wrong, but I am right and you're wrong, so shh. Please do Jazz in La La Land. Okay, I might do that at some point. This movie isn't about music, right? The point is music has nothing to do with music. It could even be about athletics. Yes, I know. That's kind of what I was saying earlier. It is a movie that might as well be about Olympic archery and all of the same things that I feel about the movie an Olympic archer would feel if the movie was about archery. It just, maybe they could have invented a sport just for the purposes of the movie, but they wanted to have a degree of realism. So, oh, okay. Cool. Who gives a shit? Great. Cactus and Soba. So, yeah, that's my mini rant right now. I'm gonna take questions from the chat as it's going by right here, but I'm gonna first find. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna take questions from the chat. So that basically the whole thing with it is I wish the movie didn't play so fast and loose with it, and that's it. That's it. And I feel like it's also been good to encourage conversation with people. Okay, one question. Oh my God. The Harry Potter scar. Yeah, I was running last night and I ran into a tree. That has nothing to do with the movie Whiplash. What about the jazz anime Kids on the Slope? I've heard of this. I actually haven't seen the anime. I guess is it a TV show? I've seen a clip from it, and it actually was pretty good. Like how the music was pretty good. That was the interesting thing, and how they animated the drummer was actually pretty good too. But I haven't seen the full I guess TV show or movie or whatever. But it felt a lot like, even just watching it was like, oh, this feels better even though it's in animation. But I don't know anything else about it, so. Who does the best version of Caravan? I am a fan of the Duke Ellington Orchestra's version of Caravan because Duke Ellington has a certain way of writing horn voicings that is, it's so intense. When you listen to it, it starts out kind of almost simple, like this kind of there's this movement I think in the 40s and 50s called Exotica. It was this very kind of, we would say problematic. It's a very problematic style of music, which, attempted to capture the sounds of the Middle East, but also Africa and also Oceania for the purposes of, putting it in white America's household so they could feel like they're part of another culture. Anyway, so Caravan originally, it was kind of like a precursor to this genre of Exotica. And the original recording of Caravan, oh my God, it's so cool. The way that he voices the horns in the second verse is just you gotta check it out. It's just brutal. It's all these minor ninths all over the place. It's freaking fantastic. So I think that's my favorite version of Caravan. Any shows or movies that depict what Whiplash tried to do better? My watch list is low. I actually honestly don't know, but a lot of people have been talking about the show, Kids on the Slope. So honestly, from what I've seen so far, I think that might be the best option. But Spinal Tap, honestly, Spinal Tap gets the music better. It really, truly does. Naming guilty pleasures, I don't think there's such a thing as a guilty pleasure, but if I had to choose, probably the music of Kesha. Yeah. With La La Land and Whiplash, do you think Damien Chazelle is damaging the public's perception of jazz or exposing people to something they haven't explored before? I think both. One of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it so much is just because there's a lot of things that didn't really enter the public discourse when it came up, I think. Honestly, I think people got excited about jazz. In fact, Glenn Fricker, of all people, he left a comment on my video saying that he hadn't really checked out that much jazz, and as a metalhead, he went and checked out jazz afterwards, and he got a lot more excited about it because it felt like there was a certain energy to the jazz in the movie. And I agree, especially the last scene, the way that it's directed and shot and recorded, just from a musical level and a technical level, the final scene is good. I think that gets people excited. So I don't really mind how the movie ends. It's more about, I don't know. It's more about just having it for me, just seeing a grotesque version of something that means something to me, portrayed the way that it is, just feels a little bit wrong. For me personally, it's an emotional reaction that musicians like myself have. Here's a super chat. Barely listen to jazz. Can I listen to Snarky Puppy and say I like jazz? By the way, nice channel, and don't let the trolls bait you. Troll bait is basically who I am. Or I like to respond to troll bait. I like to troll back. Anyway, Snarky Puppy's great. The reason why I like Snarky Puppy so much is because it's a great introduction to jazz. Jazz fusion, a la Snarky Puppy, was a very popular style of music in the 1970s. It was, in fact, the predominant form of jazz in the 1970s. You had bands like Weather Report. You had bands like the Mahavishnu Orchestra. You had Chick Corea's Return to Forever. These are bands that, if you like Snarky Puppy, you'll really like these bands because they carry a very similar sort of rock, I guess, pulse to them. They're very high energy pieces of music, are very high energy bands. And honestly, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, if you've never checked out the Mahavishnu Orchestra, especially the first album, that's a pretty intense music. And if you like Snarky Puppy, you'll probably like Mahavishnu Orchestra. Something maybe to check out, Jazz Club de Fru Vogel Funk de Den Worm. Okay, well, I apologize for absolutely destroying the German language. It is a beautiful, articulate language that I just did not do right at all. So Jazz Club der Frühe Vogel fangt den Wurm. Great. Okay, I'll check that out. I'll write that down. Question from Will Botka. How do I break it to my parents that I don't want to pursue engineering? I want to pursue jazz coming out of high school. That's a tricky question, and honestly, something that I think I might not be the best person to to give you specific advice for my own life, because my parents were very supportive, I guess, because my mom was a musician. I think the best way of doing it is going to school. Well, I honestly don't know, man, because it's a tricky thing. It involves your relationship with your parents and just expectations of what you're supposed to be in your life. And I can say that for myself, that, you know, my expectations I kind of was able to set for myself. And I think that people, it really depends on your relationship with your parents. I think it really comes down that way. So I can't give you specific advice because I don't know your relationship to your parents. But I will say that pursuing something that you are passionate about and 100% behind is basically the most important thing. And if you know that you want to pursue music and jazz instead of engineering, that is the way to go, because you will never regret having tried. You will always regret not having tried. I think that's the best piece of advice that I have to give to you. So thanks, Pabs London, for the £5. Zach Heilman writes, so glad Vox and you were able to collab. Loved that video. Well, I thank you so much. I'm going to switch over because I'm not really doing anything more with this. Vox, yeah, I'm very glad. I reached out to Estelle, the person who put together the video, after this whole thing with the national anthem video. And yeah, it was great working with them. I hope to do something again in the future. But Vox, yeah, they really killed it with the Giant Steps video. I was very lucky to be part of that. Percuss writes, I'm a drummer and a jazz performance major. I'm struggling with jazz harmony. I've never had a theory classes. What's your advice to tackle it? Well, really relate everything back to the major scale. I think that's a very important thing. And then really know your major scales. Know every single one of them, starting with C and then going around the circle of fifths and really memorizing how the major scale looks like on the piano, what the sharps and flats are, and really understanding on an intimate level what the major scale is. Because if you can relate everything back to the major scale, it makes things way easier. So, for example, if you have a G minor 7 flat 5, well, first you need to know the formula of a G minor 7 flat 5. 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. Then what you can do is you can think about, okay, well, what's the G major scale? I'm going to take the first degree of the G major scale, G. I'm going to take the third degree of the G major scale, B, and I'm going to lower it. It's a flat 3. I'm going to take the fifth degree of the G major scale, D, and I'm going to lower it because it's a flat 5. And then I'm going to take the seventh degree of the G major scale, F sharp, and then I'm going to lower that to F natural. So G minor 7 flat 5 is just G, B flat, D flat, F natural. And if you relate everything back to the major scale, it helps out so much. And of course, you're at a disadvantage because you're a drummer, but if you relate everything to the major scale as it appears on the piano, it's going to make your life so much easier in the long run. Zonda 7U7 asks, have you listened to Square Pusher or any IDM? I have. Square Pusher, I really dig this stuff, and also Aphex Twin. I've kind of come around. I really like, huge fan of Evan Marion and his work with Dana Hawkins, although that's not really IDM, but I guess it's IDM-influenced jazz. But yeah, Square Pusher's great. B-Mask writes, great job in the Whiplash video. Have money. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, super chat's coming in. Hi, Adam. I was wondering if Berkeley takes SAT scores into account. Also, what should I focus on for the audition and interview for Berkeley? I think they do take in SAT scores into account. Most of the time when I guess when you apply for school, you have to first do a pre-application. I actually don't know exactly what it is. But for the audition and interview, the thing I always say for auditioning for schools is you should always focus on doing what you do best. Don't think about what is going to impress the person that is that you're auditioning in front of, because they won't be impressed by anything. Nobody is ever impressed by anything. They've seen it all before. Do what you do best and do what you feel most comfortable with. That's really the most important thing. If you think something is going to impress somebody else, chances are it won't. Do what you do best. Peter Hayes writes, in your videos, you play keyboard instruments. What methods do you employ in learning chord voicings in multiple lines and finding difficulty in playing separate melodies in my opposing hands? So if you're playing two things at the same time, it really comes down to understanding where everything is lying to the grid. So if you're playing one pattern in one hand and another pattern in another hand, break it down to its smallest subdivision and make sure that you know exactly where each finger is moving at any point in the subdivision. So that usually means slowing down pieces of music and slowing down patterns way slower than you might think that you're able to play it. Slow everything down to an absurdly slow degree, a glacial tempo, and you'll be able to at least figure out what you're supposed to be playing. What do you think of Jared Thretton's bass technique? I actually don't know Jared Thretton. I feel like I should know Jared Thretton. Why do I not know Jared Thretton? So I'm sorry if I don't know Jared Thretton. Shy Guy Infinity asked that. Please take this money and try a beer you've never tried before. I will definitely do that. I will take, if you tell me like what style of beer, I'll try that style of beer. So maybe I'll do an IPA. I don't really normally like IPAs all that much, but anyway, it changes. Oh my gosh. I'm a bass player studying jazz performance at university next year. Any suggestions for what to listen to look at in the meantime? Check out a lot of Paul Chambers bass lines and transcribe Paul Chambers bass lines. Also, Christian McBride's bass lines. I love Christian McBride's playing. Oh my God. Okay. Got to get to these. What do you think oh my gosh. Oh, jeez. Too many. I think the key differences between jazz studies culture and wind studies concert band culture. A member of my UNT concert band, I'd like to know. I honestly don't know. I will say that wind studies and concert band culture does not exist so much on the East Coast of the United States, nearly as much as it does, especially in like UNT. And like Middle America has a much bigger concert band as well as drum corps tradition that doesn't exist around where I'm from. So I can't speak to any of the specifics, but I will say that jazz culture involves a lot of drinking and a lot of late nights, and a lot of marijuana too. It seems like you handle criticism from commenters well enough, but do you have anything about the nature of overly critical audiences towards public figures? I mean, the fact of the matter is it's weird for me to think of myself as a public figure, even though I am. But I think really it's just, I don't know, lighten up. I don't owe you anything. Nobody owes you anything. Just don't watch my stuff if you don't like it. CS student trying to play as composed jazz, making time is hard but worthwhile. Adam, favorite synth? Ooh. I'm a fan of the mini Moog synthesizers, I think. I mean, I don't really get too into depth into synths, but I use Serum and Massive when I do any synth stuff on Ableton. That's my software synth stuff. Works all right for me, I guess. Yeah. Patrick Faruga, how would one normalize different modes into indie rock art style music? My man Dose is playing a new record, and I want to expand stylistically. It's tricky because the entire thing is like whenever you're using unusual modes and unusual sounds, the music's going to sound unusual. And if you don't want the music to sound unusual, then don't use those modes. Use other things, I guess. Start with the modes of the major scale. If you want to get into some less used modes, maybe use the modes of the melodic minor scale. But yeah, write riffs. I guess a good starting off point is write riffs around a weird mode with a specific purpose of making it as weird as you possibly can, just so that you can dial it back if you don't like how weird it is. So start with the modes of melodic major, then to the melodic minor. Then you can start experimenting with modes of the harmonic minor and harmonic major if you'd want. Rick Beato has tons of videos on those weird modes. Check out Rick Beato's videos. A few things. First, thoughts on NYU Steinhardt. I'm looking to study music business. Just applied. Ari Silverman. Also, will you ever do a meet and greet and live in New York and love to meet you? Yeah, at some point. I'm doing shows in the next few months. I'll do a meet and greet in New York. Thoughts on NYU Steinhardt. Steinhardt's great, and I know a good buddy of mine, Josh Bailey, teaches there, so I occasionally sub at NYU Steinhardt. In fact, if you're in the jazz program, every year I do a sub. Like I sub for like the freshmen, like one of the classes, like I come in and talk to the freshmen briefly. So great school. great musicians who come out of there. Do you have to graduate from jazz school to in order to be a well-rounded jazz musician? I'm now learning from books. Do you think it's enough? I don't think it's. I mean, it really depends on what your purpose or like what you want to do. If you just want to play jazz music for fun and like just enjoy the music, no, you don't need to go to jazz school at all. But if you know you want to meet a lot of people, jazz school is great for that. The big thing I always say about going to music school is that it's all about meeting people and making connections with people. And so, yeah, I mean, school is really all about that. It's not so much about the knowledge that you gain. So it's very tricky to meet the kinds of people that you want to meet unless you go to jazz school. Going to a big city is important, I think, when it comes to any kind of music, because that's the sort of situation where you're going to be surrounded by the most dedicated musicians, and you always want to be the worst musician in the room. That's something that I learned very early on. You always want to be the worst musician in the room. You want other people to be better than you so you can rise to their level, rather than being the best and then other people bringing you down. Or, just have everybody be at a super high level. That's, of course, the ideal. But anyway, huge fan, impressed with your music theory knowledge. Just covered Caravan with the solo. Could you check it out on my channel? Would love the feedback. Send me a message after this, and I will check it out. Cool. I think finally, did I get through everything? Okay, thoughts on groove-based symphonic music like John Mackey or Sam Hazo? I have not heard those people. So I'm sorry if I have not I have not checked out those people. John Mackey or Sam Hazo. I'll write that down just so I can check that out. Groove-based symphonic music. I know Thomas Otis has a piece called Asila that was featured in the Mozart in the Jungle, which is kind of groove-based. It's called Extasio. And it's supposed to emulate the feeling of a rave, but it's like, it's classical music. So, hey, Adam, do you have any tips, books, or tutorials recommend for home recording and producing, struggling with lack of knowledge of any digital audio workstation? Start simple. Start with GarageBand. Apple has a lot of programs which are like designed for like production for dummies, and I started with GarageBand because I didn't really know all that much. Actually, I started with Fruity Loops, not FL Studio, Fruity Loops, a cracked version of Fruity Loops, and eventually I worked my way up from there. So yeah, I'm entirely self-taught. Then I switched to Ableton Live, and I did a bunch of Tom Kazum tutorials. He's great. And also Mr. Bill tutorials on YouTube. And I'm sure by this point there's even better tutorials, but really, some fantastic tutorials. And I basically just kind of taught myself. I am entirely self-taught in music production and music recording, and I think it shows. But so I feel like I'm coming at that from a completely naive artist's perspective, whereas I'm coming at jazz and improvisation from a completely trained artist's perspective. So I think I have two different perspectives, and I can appreciate the idea of doing something without actually any formal knowledge. As long as you approach anything with a lot of passion and conviction and open-mindedness, honestly, you will get better at it. You will learn it, and you feel like you can do it. And that's really the important thing. Shit ton of work too. A lot of work. Still learning. Finishing music school this year, I feel like I've learned a lot of theory concepts without being taught to apply them, like dictionary without grammar. That's unfortunate. And unfortunately, unless you have a good teacher, it's hard to really put perspective to things. I'm going to say that try and analyze music that you like using the musical theory tools that you have. So try and figure out what's going on in a piece of music. And you'd be surprised, and also it's pretty exciting to start seeing the inner workings of pieces of music that you know and love. Start that. Brass Tracks collab when? At some point. Ivan and Connor are, I think, touring Asia right now. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to do that. I was going to do that at one point, and then it kind of fell through, but oh well. 2 years ago, I made the mistake of introducing my band percussion students to you, so now they get to hear them play a lick at me a lot. You suck. I guess that's my main contribution to the popular discourse, is the lick. Congratulations. It's even been called Adam Neely's lick, except it's not. It's not my lick at all. But I guess it's been associated with my channel. So, who's your favorite Brazilian artist? Oh, I would say Rosa Passos. I love a lot of Brazilian singers. Also Caetano Veloso. But Rosa Passos has this version of Águas de Março, Waters of March. That's so freaking cool. Like rhythmically, it's so weird and displaced, but I love her singing. It's really, really cool. My perspective on Brazilian music is, of course, definitely coming from a jazz musician who learned a little bit about about Brazilian music, but Rosa Passos. I play keyboard, but I'm visually handicapped, so I play by ear. What can I do to learn jazz? Transcribe solos that you hear and learn to play them on your instrument. So if you hear Oscar Peterson play a really awesome piano solo, try playing it. Learning by ear is not a handicap by any stretch of the imagination. Stevie Wonder learned by ear. He's completely visually impaired. So I think that's a big thing, learning solos and transcribing them. Scrams, I have no idea what that means. Thank you, Oren Trainer, for the $5. Connor Marine, hey Adam, any advice for a gigging musician living in a city with a toxic, non-existent music scene? Create your own, although that's a lot of work. I think just having events, creating your own events, and making sure that they aren't toxic. It's hard, man. I don't really have much advice in that way of like creating a scene, or if the scene is bad. I try and stay away from that. I try and move to where the cool people are, or at least the people that I enjoy playing with. I don't really care if they're cool or not. I just enjoy whether or not playing. That's what I mean by cool. So, yeah. Did you ever find yourself plateauing while in school? And if so, how did you overcome that struggle? Yeah. The big thing with plateaus, I'd say, is shifting your perspective quite radically. And I've done that so many times. I felt like I plateaued with my bass technique many times, and I still feel like that. But then I stopped playing bass for a while, and then I practiced like piano or guitar or something else completely unrelated to it. It's a total shift in perspective, a paradigm shift. And that ends up doing wonders for your mental health, as well as just knowing when to do it, as well as just like your general musicianship, because you can still be working on your musicianship just in a different way. Don't feel like you need to obsess over one thing if it's just bringing you down. You ever find yourself, plateauing? Do you know any pianist that has a channel like yours? I think I know bass better than piano, and I'm a pianist. Check out Nare's Soul. She's great. She's definitely more along the lines of, classical piano. Amy Nolte has a fantastic channel. There's a bunch of channels like that. I guess Amy Nolte would be the closest to my channel, maybe, just because she does jazz stuff. But she has, of course, it's nothing like my channel. But definitely check out Amy Nolte and Nare's Soul for piano. Specifically piano. I'm making trance music, and my mentor severely dislikes when I try to implement modal interchanges. He says it objectively doesn't work musically because it's out of key. How do I respond? Well, you might have to think about it this way. I'm assuming your mentor is a traditionalist of the style that you're working in. And whenever you're implementing theoretical concepts from other styles and just putting them into another style, it's not going to sound like a pure version of trance or pure version of that style. I can imagine that having a modal interchange in trance music would be fairly non-standard. And that's not a good or a bad thing. It's just you need to understand that it's going to be non-standard and that it is going to be wrong in the eyes of traditionalists. And then you have to kind of understand that you have to come at it from like a holistic perspective. Like, are you going to try and become a really pure, technically accomplished trance musician or trance composer or trance producer, or are you going to try and combine a bunch of other different styles together into a new form, or are you going to find a balance? And it's really a personal decision. So there is the impulse to try and implement everything that you've learned into every style of music. Maybe that's not always going to be the best, because once you start implementing things from a different style of music, what you're doing is you're changing the music. That's not a good or bad thing, but you're changing the music. To say that it objectively doesn't work musically is no, but it might not objectively work musically for that particular style. Who knows? Okay, hopefully I got through most of those super chats. Whew, that was a lot of them. All right. So thank you, everybody, for the super chats. Yeah. Adam, I'm an EDM producer that's faced with a weird situation. Most popular song is Spooky Donkey. I've made tons of better songs, but they're less popular. What should I do? I feel the same way about my YouTube channel. Some of the videos that get super popular in terms of the algorithm or what people watch, I think are kind of stupid. Like the video I made, like why pop music sounds bad to you. It's not a very well put together video. In fact, there's some of it which bears a striking resemblance to another YouTuber's stuff. And so I kind of, that was unintentional, but I kind of don't like the fact that it became that popular. A lot of things that I've done have become popular that I don't think should be popular, and things that I really, really enjoy and really put a lot of heart and soul into just haven't become that popular. That's kind of the name of the game, really. You can't control the reception of your creative work. You just have to accept that once you've created it and put it out there into the world, it's not yours anymore. That's a hard lesson to learn. I'm still wrestling with it. Adam, Neely, do you think a flute player can play John Coltrane's Giant Steps? Yes, a flute player definitely can. The flute player by the name of Sarpe, I forget his last name, but he goes by Sharp Eye. He's a Turkish flute player. He's a freaking fantastic flute player. And he shreds Giant Steps. He shreds every jazz standard, and he has this book that he sells all the time, but called Unlock, I think. Anyway, check him out. He's great. He's fantastic. Did you get into a fight with your cat? Echo doesn't live here right now just because I'm traveling a lot, but he'll be back. Don't worry. Thoughts on Joey Alexander? Joey Alexander, for those of you who don't know who he is, he's a child phenom. He's a jazz prodigy, I guess. And there are very few young musicians who become jazz prodigies because the skill necessary to improvise over chord changes is a very different skill than the motor skills necessary to just play music without thinking along that sort of creative line. And so Joe Alexander represents kind of this unusual thing of a child prodigy who is able to navigate complicated chord changes. It's very strange and very rare. I've only seen his Giant Steps improvisation video, and it's pretty incredible. It's pretty insane to watch. The only other child prodigy that I know of that was like that is Eldar. I forget his last name, but he is in a super group with Henrik from Dirty Loops and Matt Garska from Animals as Leaders. Jazz child prodigies are really interesting. What happened to your forehead? I answered this earlier. I ran into a tree last night when I was running. Don't run in the dark, especially in wooded areas. Adam, have you heard the song When You Die by MGMT? I have not heard that song. I'm sorry, I can't comment on that. Are you continuing How to Not Suck at Music series? I have a fusion reharmonization project that I would like your take on. I'm doing those very rarely now, only when I'm collaborating with other people like Rick Beato or Jeff Schneider. At some point in the future, but it might be several months. So, ran into a tree. Are you really okay? Blink twice if you need help. Yes, I literally ran into a tree. Yeah, that does sound very suspect, doesn't it? Have you heard Art Tatum's music in particular? Oh, sorry, question. Have you heard Art Tatum's music, in particular, Blue Skies? Yeah, Art Tatum, for those of you who don't know, he is probably a person that maybe would have been better represented in the movie Whiplash in terms of like a prodigy that everybody like looks up to. Charlie Parker is definitely like that. I guess the story is better for Charlie Parker, but Art Tatum was a virtuoso. Charlie Parker was more artistically savvy and moved the music forward in a lot of ways and came up with much more inventive ideas rhythmically and melodically. But Art Tatum was easily one of the most technically accomplished pianists of all time. If you ever check out his music, Tiger Rag, check out Tiger Rag by Art Tatum at some point, because when you hear it, the story goes is that the first time that you hear Tiger Rag, you think that it's two pianists playing at the same time because it's going by so fast. And you're like, how could one person physically play so many notes? And Art Tatum somehow physically plays like an insane number of notes. And there's a story about how he was, T for two is another one. It's like an old early 20th century, I think 1910s standard. And he befriended this classical musician who was trying to write a version of T for two also. And they were like trading notes and talking about how the piano might work for T for two. And Art Tatum started playing and just like playing some incredible stuff. And the composer was like, "Oh my God, when did you write that? Who wrote that transcription?" He's like, "Oh, I'm nobody. I'm just making it up right now." Art Tatum is one of these people who you check out Art Tatum. Nicholas Lemaire, I love your work. I'm a designer artist. Lately, I've been burnt out of art. Seeing your passion for music inspiring me to continue art. If you want any of my work, need designer, see me. I will definitely do that. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate people who say that they feel inspired by watching my channel. It's really exciting for me to hear that. I guess perspective shift is always important. I don't think about music all the time, although I do actually think about music a lot. I try and shift my perspective to other things, just listening to podcasts, or I don't know. I think about other things just so I try not to get burnt out on music. And it's hard because when you do something that you love and you're so passionate about and it's your job, there's a level of corruption there because you want to do something all the time, but you have to do something all the time. And it's not nice to feel like you have to do something. So there's always a balance. Dylan Miyashiro, I grew up on Cassiopeia, but I love Sungazer and the other modern jazz band songs you've shared in videos. Any listening recommendations? Definitely check out Evan Marion. Evan Marion and Dana Hawkins is basically kind of the blueprint for my band Sungazer. Friend of mine, insane bass player, and Dana Hawkins is an absurd drummer, and their sort of music making is really inspiring to me. Definitely check out Knower and anything that Lewis Cole ever does, because another inspiration for Sungazer in my band. Definitely check out Nerve, Jojo Mayer's band. Another huge inspiration. Honestly, he's probably the one that kind of like defined the scene for electronic jazz stuff. Yeah, who else? Zach Danziger and his bands Mr. Barrington and Edit Bunker. Another killer drummer, Zach Danziger. Yeah. Any advice on writing music? Whenever I sit down and try to write something, I just end up noodling for like a half an hour and get nothing done. Set a goal for yourself, like a reasonable goal. Like, I am going to write a verse, and just write a verse. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be good at all. Write something. When you approach writing music like a craftsman, like when you're approaching it with a goal in mind, so it becomes less of a creative process and more of a work process, more things happen. That's the way it works. I get the most done if I'm just sitting there with a specific goal in mind. And it doesn't have to be good, but the initial trick and the initial challenge is to just get ideas out there. Again, it doesn't have to be good. And this is one of the things, like, it's sometimes tricky in the beginning because you kind of expect everything that you do to be good, and none of it's ever going to be good, but don't expect it to. And if you don't come into something with any expectations, then you're going to have a much better time. Yeah. How do you write the drummer that you mentioned? Zach Danziger. Zach Danziger. Neely, thank you so much for opening my eyes to jazz. What books or online resources do you recommend to learn music theory from the ground up? Ben Levin's music series, Music Theory from the Ground Up. Check out Ben Levin. He has a great series. Hey, Insane in the Rain music. Carlos, right? Many ideas will be bad, some good. The more you throw, the more good you'll probably have. Yeah, it's a statistical game. Statistically, if you're just writing a lot of music, you will eventually write something good. But if you don't write a lot of music, you won't write something good. It's just the artist Pablo Picasso said that art is a sum of destructions for him. So he just has a bunch of ideas, and a big part of composing, or like making art, is throwing away ideas until you have a good one. So you just keep destroying, you keep throwing away bad ideas that you have until you eventually find something that's good. Crash X writes, I'll be playing bass in my high school's production of In the Heights by Lin-Manuel Miranda. The problem is I can't read bass sheet music. Unfortunately, you might have to read bass sheet music. Anytime you do any sort of musical theater stuff, you have to learn, you have to be reading sheet music because the director will sometimes reference specific measures, and you need to know where that measure is and what happens when. Musical theater is one of those things where you definitely need to read sheet music. It's one of the very few styles of music where reading sheet music is absolutely 100% necessary. That said, I've played that book. I've played I played one of the, I guess it was a national tour. I subbed on a national tour of In the Heights briefly when it was in New Jersey. And I've played that book. I've played In the Heights, and it's an awesome book, especially the the Blackout Scene and 96,000. Fun. It's such a fun book to play because the orchestrators that Lin-Manuel Miranda got to write all the salsa parts were actual salsa musicians, so they wrote it very idiomatically, and so it feels good to play. It's like, oh, no, this isn't like the salsa light. This is like actually pretty decently written salsa music. Of course, filtered through the lens of musical theater, so it ends up sounding super cheesy for most people, but at the same time, it's a fun time. I feel that people don't want to hear original music, but what they're familiar with, so I play covers. Do you think music is for the writer or for the listener? Thoughts? Thanks for the great content. There's so many roles that music fills in society. We live in a society. So, yeah, it depends on where you are, because for most people, they just want to hear music that they're familiar with, which is okay. It's a comforting thing, and that actually speaks to, I think, it speaks to the universal nature of music. It speaks to what it means for us. If they hear somebody playing a song that they like, they feel comforted. They're like, I know that. I love this moment because I know that thing. Original music, almost, I don't want to say it's presumptuous, but it's insisting that somebody listen. And that can turn most people off, honestly, because if you insist on somebody listening to something, the person listening might not think that it's good, or they might not want to engage with it. And it's a lot more of an uphill battle, but I also think that it's a worthwhile battle to have, because once you make that connection with somebody on your original music, what you're doing is you're speaking with your own voice, and you're having a much more direct connection with somebody rather than playing a cover. So it's almost a personal choice on what you want to do. Do you want to have an immediate connection with somebody based on somebody else's music? Or do you want to fight an uphill battle for years for something that you might not even be able to have a much more personal connection with somebody? It's just it's a question. Everything is a question. Everything's a question. Do you play Fortnite? No, I don't. I don't play the Fort Fight. Jaime Altozano, anybody? Yeah. Okay, first of all, I've been aware of Jaime, right? That's his name. For a while. I just don't speak Spanish. But I will watch his videos all the time because they're so well done. And, I wish that, he's approaching it from a very different perspective than I am, but I feel like fills that niche on that side of YouTube, on the Spanish-speaking YouTube, that, me and a lot of other English-speaking YouTubers fill. And his videos are so good. They're really, really good. If you are an English speaker and you just want more content, more music theory content, check out Jaime Altozano and just turn the subtitles on, and it's just fantastic, delicious YouTube content. I write music for adverts. I usually have to turn down requests for jazz briefs. Is there any tips you can give me how to make music sound jazzy for people who like pop music? If you just want the functional jazz, just 2-5-1 chord progressions, seventh chords instead of triads, spread voicings, especially drop two voicings on the piano, walking bass lines. Honestly, for you, try and do a style analysis. Try and, if maybe for advertising, they might want, a specific style of music or have a reference. Try listening to some references and then try and copy what those references are. I mean, it might not be right, but at least you'll get pretty close. Jaime is pure arrogance. Don't lose your time. Trust me. I guess. Jaime. Anyway, whatever. I don't pretend to be able to speak Spanish, so I seriously apologize. Have you ever ran into Jean-Baptiste or other members of Stay Human? And can we talk about how amazing his new album is? I have not checked out his new album, but I know some of the members of Stay Human. I know, Grace Kelly, and I guess is she a member? I don't know. Patrick Bartley. He occasionally sits in with the band. He's like an EWI player. I know a couple other people who have at least sat in with the band. Not like the main crew. I know of a couple other people, but I guess I haven't ran into any of the other people. But they're killing. I love that group of people. They're really good musicians, and just the stuff that I've seen come out from that collective is just awesome. They're freaking great. Everything good with jazz. Everything good. John Baptiste is everything good with jazz. And actually, now that I think about this, like, John Baptiste is everything good about New York City jazz, except, coming, I guess, from like a New Orleans sort of background, I guess. But he's now like on Colbert, and like that's like a big popular culture perspective for the scene that I'm in. So I guess, that's a good thing. That's great. Hell yeah, John Baptiste. Why do you think big band Try this again. Why do you think that big band has historically been the standard house band music for late night talk shows? Carson Letterman, when those shows premiered well after big band's peak. Big band music is loud. It is incredibly loud. I don't think anybody really realizes how loud a jazz big band is in a way that's different than amplified music. An unamplified jazz big band has a certain air, like literally how air hits you is different. It like the way that air goes down like your throat and the back of your neck and your chest is visceral. It's really exciting. If you have a loud rock band, it just hits your ears basically. And, but having a loud jazz big band, it's a much more full body experience. And so that excitement, especially for in the studio, is palpable. I think that carries a reason to it. Of also, like, historically, like, big band music is coded for classy, like late night kind of like clubs and swanky joints and all that sort of thing. So a lot of late night talk show hosts like want to cultivate that energy. That's a big part of it, I think, honestly. Of course, now it's a little bit too far past its peak to really, be still part of it, which is why you have The Roots and Stay Human, which are both fantastic bands. I'm really glad that we're actually in a really golden era almost of late night American TV bands. They're freaking fantastic musicians. The people that come through, it's awesome. I love it. Any thoughts on harmonic polyrhythms and free jazz? A lot of people like Paul Motion would have the band play at different tempos at the same time. My definition of what a harmonic polyrhythm might be a little bit different than what you're thinking of a harmonic polyrhythm. For me, harmonic polyrhythms are whenever you take a polyrhythm and speed it up so fast that it turns into an interval. That's what I talked about in my video on harmonic polyrhythms. Playing at different tempos at the same time is a tried and true method. Honestly, Robert Glasper is the pianist that I mentioned in the Whiplash video, just to bring it back to me talking about Whiplash. Robert Glasper, he has this cool thing where he'll improvise in one tempo, and he has the rhythm section play in a different tempo, but they're locked very much in the same realm. Like the rhythm section is one area, and Robert Glasper's playing in a different area, and it's such an interesting effect. There's his drummer Chris Daddy Dave has this concert with, I think the bass player's name is Foley, and he has this concert that's on YouTube where they do a similar thing where the bass player is just like playing one bass line in one tempo the whole time, and Chris Dave and the sax player play some really wacky free jazz, but as long as you have that bass player just keeping that bass line steady the whole time, it creates this really interesting effect. I think the term is tempo stratification, if I'm going to invent a term. I don't think I invented it, but that's the term that I've heard thrown around. Stratification, whenever you have two things that don't seem to relate to one another at all occurring at the same time. And then the effect, the musical effect, as long as they keep occurring like that for a long period of time, is really interesting because your ear can be drawn to either one at the same time, or you can try and find relationships between the two of them, even if they don't exist. So anyway. Maybe too simple a question. How to start an amateur band in New York? I'm an amateur, just want to play music for joy and get better, nervous about being an amateur. Craigslist, believe it or not, is pretty good. That's how I found a lot of the people that I actually play with and like gig with eventually. Craigslist is a crapshoot. You'll have to go through many, many different people to find the right ones. But at the same time, that's kind of like, that's a good one. Go to shows that you like, of music that you like, and meet people there. Because chances are, if you're going to the show with a similar sort of vibe and aesthetic for what you want to make with your music, you'll meet people who also enjoy that, and you can introduce yourself like, hey, my name is BK, and I like music, I play the guitar, what do you play, and et cetera, et cetera. So meeting more people, I think, like that at shows is good. Just want to say thanks for the great videos. I'm a pro musician in a prominent European symphony. Oh, cool. And I learned so much from you. Love your perspective. Thank you so much. DKK. Oh, Incendia HL. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. Appreciate it. Andrew Poplatsky. I've been writing and producing music for 6 years and haven't been able to finish a song in 5 years. Okay. I get tired of the song before I'm able to finish it. Advice on staying interested. Help. Well, that comes down to the idea of thinking about composing music as being work. Sometimes you have to do work that you don't want to do. And that's frustrating for a lot of people because music is supposed to be an escape from work and composition is supposed to be an escape from work. But like with anything worth doing, you might have to do something that is difficult to finish. And I understand that because I have all these like unfinished pieces of music that are just in a hard drive that I've never like really gone through. Maybe at one point I might do an Andrew Huang sort of situation where I'll go through like old music files and like finish them. But for the most part, I've kind of forgotten about them and abandoned them. But it is a pretty exhilarating experience once you've actually finished a piece of music and you say that you're done with it. And then you go back and listen to it and then you realize, oh, it's actually pretty great. I enjoyed what I did. And once you get a taste of that, then that is a little bit more of an incentive to actually continue writing the music and powering through, even if you aren't super inspired. Because the more that you just power through, the more that you'll find ideas that you wouldn't have already found if you just kind of waited for inspiration. I think thinking about musical composition as a form of work is the most important thing to your creative development as a writer of music. And, I definitely think about that when I make YouTube videos. I'm not always inspired to make a YouTube video, but I work on it a lot. And by working on it, I make things that I think I get excited about. So, great. Fantastic. Okay, just double checking, making sure. Cool. Oh my God. Do you like Bill Wirtz? Yes, I do. I do. Rant about La La Land, please. Okay, I haven't seen La La Land. Thoughts on Earmaster for ear training? I don't know Earmaster. Honestly, I use this app called Polytonus. Let's see if I can't bring it up because it's a pretty great app. I don't have it set up right now so that you can hear it through the iPhone, but you can at least see it. This is the app that I use. You can like play something. Yeah, it's not good. Oh, I guess no. I guess you can't hear it. But it'll play something and then you have to like say what notes you heard. So I have no idea what notes I heard, but let's say it's that. Oh, turns out that it was the 1, the 2, and the flat 7. Anyway, I use Polytonus a lot. That's the one that I use. What was the drummer you played with during the busking video a while back? That was Ian Barnett. Ian Barnett is a great drummer. He's the drummer for Betty Who, who's a pop singer. He also plays a lot with JP Bouvet and Drew of the Drew, if you know those guys. JP Bouvet is incredible. He's part of that whole scene, that Berkeley situation. Yeah, Ian Barnett is really... he's also the drummer for Aberdeen, the band that I play with. And he's really into something called footwork music, which is the style of hip hop from Chicago. And yeah, he's really good at playing live footwork. He has a bunch of videos on Meinl's channel that you should check out. Ian Barnett, it's great. Hi Adam, have you seen Andrew Wong and Rob Skellen's videos about making 10 songs in 10 hours? What are your thoughts on it? I have. It was cool. It was a great sort of approach. Ooh. I'm gonna turn that off. It was a great sort of approach to, I'm always a fan of trial by fire. So if you have to make up something really quickly, chances are it's probably going to be pretty good, actually, because you have no room to second guess yourself. And by just getting out ideas, it's a nice challenge. So I think that it's a fun thing to do. I've thought about doing a similar challenge before, but since they did it, now I don't have to do it. So. How to get over imposter syndrome as a musician? Well, I don't know. When you find out, tell me, because I certainly feel like an imposter a lot of the time. Even though I know on paper I'm not super an imposter, but I'm also like associated with like these hyper talented, amazing musicians like Jacob Collier or whoever, or Joe Dart or Sam Wilkes, by the way, who are like bass players. And I'm like, these guys are so much better than me. They really are. And you don't need to agree with me on that, but I understand that they are really significantly better bass players and musicians. I talk about music. Maybe I talk about music better than they do. And so it never really goes away. Unfortunately, it doesn't. But I guess, having enough self-confidence in what you do well, I think that's important. And that can be a tricky thing to find for yourself, because sometimes you just don't know. You don't know what's important, or you don't know what is good for you. Let me try that again. You don't know what you're good at yet when you're starting out. So, yeah, that's hard to answer, man. At what age are you too old to learn music? Never. Say the line, Adam. A equals 432. I'm sure that's going to be taken out of context. Dude, you're awesome. I want to say you're the most cerebral musician I've ever seen. I love the depth you go into. I wish you could donate, but I'm a poor college lad. Thank you so much. I certainly am not the most cerebral musician I know. If you like my general attitude towards music, I would suggest checking out Leonard Bernstein and what he has to say about music, because I'm trying to be doing a poor imitation of Leonard Bernstein whenever I talk about music. Everything I do is a poor imitation of Leonard Bernstein. What are some ways you yourself are working to improve your bass playing? Just make sure that we are all practicing. Oh, yeah, of course. I constantly am practicing 16th note syncopations and rhythms, although recently I just haven't had a chance to bring up my bass, pick up my bass and practice as much as I would like to. Whenever I practice things like counting to 4 while I'm playing, to try and make my count to 4 as relaxed and natural as I possibly can. Because if you can count to 4 while you're playing, and you're playing in time signature 4/4, what happens is you can tap into the natural cadence of your speaking rhythm, your speaking voice, and you can apply that to your musical rhythm. And the more comfortable you are just by counting to 4 as you're playing syncopations against that count, in theory, the better rhythm you're going to have. That's what I found personally for myself. So that's what I do whenever I'm practicing count to 4. They did surgery on a grape. I heard that. I'm very excited for that. I have 3 questions. Okay. Jeez. Never mind. Sorry. What the? Okay. Adam, One Kiss by Calvin Harris. Dua Lipa uses Phrygian the whole time. It's awesome. Thoughts, feelings, insights. It's Phrygian pop future. I haven't checked that out, but I wouldn't be surprised that Phrygian has its place in pop music. Phrygian has a certain feeling to it. That flat 2 is, of course, a dark feeling, but it still feels super grounded because you have the natural 5 in the scale. And whenever you have any kind of mode with the root and the natural 5th, chances are it's going to feel super grounded and not feel too weird. So I can see Phrygian working well in certain circumstances. I need to check out One Kiss, though, because I actually have really enjoyed everything Dua Lipa has released, like all the people that she's had write songs for her. So I'll check that out. Animals as leaders, yay or nay as a jazz musician? Yay, for sure. When I was at the Manhattan School of Music, what happened is I gave a presentation in one of my classes on animals as leaders on Tempting Time, and just analyzed the structure of how Tempting Time worked, like the patterns of 5s and 4s that Tosin Abasi was using. So I definitely think that that Animals as Leaders is great, and yeah, and I'm a big fan. Thought of a beer to try. Bitches Brew by Dogfish Head. I've tried that. I've had that. I've shared, after I graduated graduate school, my good friend and roommate, Elliot Klein, bought us a bottle of Bitches Brew, and we drank it out in the park. And it was delicious. I cannot count while I play. How do I learn to practice this after playing by feel for years? So a big part of it is being able to understand where the subdivisions are of whatever the music is. And if you don't understand where the subdivisions are, you won't be able to do this. So what that means is, like, if you're thinking like the Tresillo rhythm, da, ah, 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 ah. So where the subdivisions land, you have 1, the and of 2, and then 4. So if you're going to count to 4, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. And that takes a tremendous amount of coordination to do. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you do it slow enough, however, you can then speed it up so then it starts feeling more natural. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's kind of what I mean about counting and playing at the same time. Hey, Adam, have you heard of the Japanese songwriter Sheena Ringo? Thank you so much for the donation, by the way. She is an extremely popular rock, jazz, pop musician in Japan and one of the most diverse musicians. In my humble opinion, Courtney Swain from Bent Knee has also cited her as a main influence, too. Yeah, I've heard of her. I have not checked out any of her stuff, so I guess I have to do that right now. I'll check it out after the stream. Courtney is a badass singer, and she has such a unique style. So I'm assuming that she borrowed and got a lot from Sheena Ringo, and I know Courtney is also from Japan as well. So like, I definitely need to check that out because Benny is such an exciting band. They're all my friends, all my good friends too, which is awesome. So she's mentioned that. I forget if she mentioned that personally, but I know that she's mentioned her before. So I'll definitely check out Sheena Ringo after the thing, and I might then give my opinion. But thank you for the suggestion, and thank you for the donation. Really, really appreciate it. Do you have any tips for learning to read sheet music? As a guitarist now, reading both tabs and notes because I can't get note length for tabs. Sheet music is not that hard to read. In terms of, like, in other words, the logic behind sheet music is not super hard. The notes all have defined places on the staff. And then as long as you know where the notes are on the staff and how to read rhythms, there really isn't anything else. What it really just comes down to at a certain point is enough practice, like practicing doing it. And it takes many years to feel comfortable with it. The logic behind reading sheet music is not hard. It's just hard to do because you haven't done it that often. And it might take many years of practice to really feel 100% comfortable with it. So start reading as much as you can. Pick up like a Bach, you said guitarist? Okay, so yeah, pick up the Bach flute partitas and just sight read it all. It's going to be hell. It's going to be really hard work, but it's going to be very rewarding, I swear. If you haven't already checked out Tantacruel's videos, I've been doing that recently. Yeah, I was recently recommended Tantacruel's Sibelius video, and I've checked out a few others. They're pretty good. Also, any chance of guests on Musica Analytica? Nare Sol Beato. Musica Analytica is on hold for right now, but if it ever starts up again in the future, we're definitely doing some guests. I might also start my own podcast, or a separate podcast. I guess it's not really my own, but I might start a separate podcast too. Anyway, yeah. Adam, do you ever listen to Chan? Chan. I like how Chan is always capitalized. And other math rock bands, what do you think of them? I really like them. I don't know a whole lot about them. I'll say that. I'm tickled by the style. I'm tickled by the math rock, clean guitar-ish stuff with harmonized guitar, but it does sound a bit samey after a while. Same thing with like any instrumental music that has the same instrumentation for every song. So Chan definitely is one of those. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good. Thanks for all the awesome things I've learned with you. What kind of daily routine would you recommend an amateur metal bass player to get good? Transcribe. My big thing with everybody now is if you're learning music in the beginning, learn as much as you can by ear and learn how to play as much as you can by ear until you feel like you've plateaued. But in the beginning, learn as many songs as you possibly can and learn, like, learning songs is such an important thing. I wish I learned more songs, honestly, in the beginning rather than putzing around with playing scales and exercises, which is very important. Don't get me wrong. Scales and exercises are very important, but at the same time, they're not going to mean a whole lot if you don't have any practical application for any of them. So learn a new song a day. Watching a review of Whiplash, have you seen La La Land? What's your opinion of the music in that film? So I've mentioned this earlier in the live stream, but I have not seen La La Land yet. La La Land is on my to-do list, but I'm definitely going to check it out along with, of course, Sheena Ringo, and a couple of the other suggestions in this chat. Yeah, I need to check it out. I've heard that the movie gets the plight of the jazz musician better, I guess, but its actual use of jazz is not very good. And also, by the way, I'm giving an opinion that I have only heard from other people. I've also heard that the soundtrack is good, but not jazz in the slightest. So just rely on that information. When I compose music, I can create pseudo demo tracks in GarageBand. It lets me get an idea of an arrangement I'm hearing. Do you do anything similar? I do that all the time. All the time. I also do it in Sibelius, but I've been doing a lot more now in Ableton Live, where I'll demo something up and then I'll send it to players and then I'll be like, hey, this is the music. In fact, for jazz school, whenever I do those gigs, like what I'll do is I'll write all the arrangement out in Sibelius and then I'll demo the arrangement. So I'll like find an a cappella track of like a pop song that I'm arranging. I'll drag it in and I'll, program some drums and do a bunch of stuff on addition to the Sibelius sheet music, just so the people in the band can hear what it is I'm thinking about when I have a particular arrangement. So demoing is a very, very important thing. Why don't you live stream yourself watching La La Land? Well, because it will be taken down pretty quickly, unfortunately. I've thought about doing that. In fact, earlier on for Patreon people, I was going to live stream myself watching Whiplash, but unfortunately I couldn't because I knew it would be taken down by the YouTube algorithm gods. So that's unfortunately not something that I can do. Hey, Adam, I've been making music for 6.5 years. Very specific. Got a huge, long, terrible block. I continuously get great detailed inspiration, but I never want to execute it. Any tips and pointers? I feel like that's a common thread. The feeling of like getting excited, but then when you're faced with the work, then starting to dread it. And I guess that just speaks to what creative things are. Because people get so excited and inspired by the creative aspect of it. But then when confronted with the sheer intensity that is the work required to make it come to fruition, it feels very daunting. It always feels daunting. I've made a video about this. I played a show using only a 1993 Casio Ratman. I think limitations are the best way forward. So if you have a specific goal, a specific tiny goal, like, again, I'm going to make just a verse of this song, or I'm just going to come up with a loop in GarageBand. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. That is much more productive, having these shorter goals than having a big goal that you can't see the end of. Ira Glass has this thing where he says, our taste is exceeded by our ability. So we know what we want to be able to do, but we don't have the technique yet to get to there. And it can feel super daunting. And breaking it down into much smaller parts, I think really helps in that. Helps get us bridge the gap between our taste and what we know is good and what we can do to actually achieve what we know is good. So, yeah. Have you felt unworthy of an instrument? I'm looking at getting a USA PRS, but I don't feel my skill will make good use of it. How do you know when you can make use of a new instrument? I mean, I don't really think along those lines. If you can afford a nice new instrument, just fine, you can play it. I never think along those sort of precious sorts of lines of like, I'm not worthy of a Stradivarius, although maybe for a Stradivarius, yeah, but like for a PRS or anything like that, I mean, just play it, have fun with it, man. Sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that. Don't feel unworthy just because you aren't super experienced. Enjoy the instrument for what it is. Recommend any good colleges to check when considering jazz studies? Types of college auditions with traveling nerves and interacting with the judges. Thanks. I said this earlier. The big tip for auditions is to make sure that you are practicing and playing something that you are super comfortable with, because you're not going to impress anybody. Never select material that you think is going to impress judges, because I guarantee you it won't. They're mainly looking for how well you are at executing your ideas on your instrument. And if you are comfortable with it, you will be able to show the judges that you can do that. In terms of great jazz schools, I mean, Berklee College of Music, USC, Oberlin is great for jazz, New School, NYU Steinhardt, Manhattan School of Music. There's so many good schools in the United States. I can't speak for for people outside of the States, but that's jazz schools in the States. Pick a string, 5 frets, only those notes, play song progression. What are your favorite music games? Thanks for being you. That's a fun one. Another fun one would be to just try and play a whole piece of music using only one note across different octaves. That's a fun music game. Another fun music game might be to try and play a solo just using 4 notes. And it's possible, but it's hard. Thank you, MC Stravinsky, for the donation. Thank you, Kwert, for the donation. Crypto Main writes, I've always played by ear and I've composed a couple of tracks. However, I reached the point where I feel the lack of music theory. Where do I start? Music schools have prerequisites I lack. Learn major scales. Learn the notes in the major scales, how they're constructed. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Learn the names of the notes of all the major scales. So I've said this earlier in the stream. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C for C. G, B, so let me try this again. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G for the key of G. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D for the key of D, and go around the circle of fifths. Learn all the major scales. That's the big important place to learn. And then start learning the diatonic triads of each of the major scales. That'll keep you busy for quite some time. How do you get a fluid right hand technique on bass octaves and such? I just transcribed Teen Town and my plucking hand is falling apart. Yeah, it's tricky. Octaves on bass are just a bitch. They're really hard to play. Practice slowly. Practice slowly. And yeah, that's my main advice. Practice slowly. It's kind of, it's a cop out, but practicing slowly and deliberately, slow, deliberate practice, relaxed practice will get you where you need to go. What's the deal with so many popular show music using 1, 6, 3, 7? Or 6, 4 minor, 4. Okay, I know what you're trying to say. You're trying to say the progression, the Axis of Awesome progression, where it's 6 minor, 4, 1, 5. Why is that used so much and why does it sound so good? It's a popular diatonic progression that progresses in a logical way. It's also an example, interestingly, of something called regressive root motion. And this is something that I'm going to talk about at some point. But the 6 minor going to the 4, going to the 1 to the 5, is each one of the chords moves backwards from where they normally would supposed to go. Actually, sorry, not backwards. Backwards. Except for the 6 going to the 4. 4 normally would progress, let's see. Yeah, it's going kind of counterclockwise in the circle of fifths. It's going clockwise. Wait, what? Yeah, it's going clockwise in the circle of fifths. Most of the time when you have progressions in like root 5 progressions, like 2, 5, 1, it goes around this way. Like D minor going to G going to C has a very specific sort of feeling associated with it. But in this case, it would be like F going to C going to G. It's going in the opposite direction, so it feels like it's almost kind of being lifted up. So it's an example of positive harmony, if we're going to use a Jacob Collier term, versus negative harmony, which comes down. This is maybe not the best way of describing it right now, but I think that's kind of like, I need to figure out the best way of describing what it is I'm talking about, but that's kind of what's going on. So I think that progression, just because it's popular because it goes a different way around the circle of fifths than you might normally think. Yeah. When I try to learn music traditionally, I would just revert to playing by ear. I still don't know if I want to play music anymore after 2 years writer's block. Learn a different style of music. Approach a completely different style of music on a different instrument. I guarantee you'll find a lot more inspiration there than if you just try to keep playing and doing the thing that you're doing and you feel like you have writer's block. I think that's the important thing. How do you balance career tunnel vision and remaining a balanced, informed human? That's tricky. Reading a lot and reading material that differs from your area of expertise, I think, helps with the balance. Having relationships and friendships with people outside of music also definitely helps. So that's how you can avoid tunnel vision, I think. MC Stravinsky writes, does jazz overuse dissonances in a way that they lose their tension effect? Because the consonances are not very strong. It makes the music sometimes tiring for the ear and presumptuous. Yeah. Yes and no. I think So at the turn of the 20th century, you had something called 12-tone music. And the whole idea with 12-tone music, according to Stravinsky, was that you would emancipate dissonance. There was going to be so much dissonance that dissonance almost kind of didn't matter anymore, and music could be free of this idea of tension and release. Music was just pure music because it was just this constant stream of dissonances, basically, or dissonances that didn't rely upon traditional understandings of chord structures and dominant going to tonic and things like that. So sometimes jazz music does that, I guess. But at the same time, you know, a sensitive composer will be sensitive to dissonance and the control of it. So if you overuse dissonance, it does get quite exhausting. I remember when I was at Berklee College of Music in Boston, I was going to a lot of these concerts, these jazz composition recitals held by professors there and students. And they were quite exhausting to go to, honestly. And, you know, I was part of the scene. I was doing my jazz composition degree, and I was checking out music that I thought I really enjoyed, but it was very demanding. It was very exhausting to listen to this music for a long period of time. So I would sometimes fall asleep at these recitals. And for somebody who understands that and understands this balance of dissonance and consonance and understands that there needs to be some sort of hook that keeps people grounded, I think that's the important thing for anybody who's experimenting with weird jazz dissonances. So yeah, it is presumptuous, I guess, but when people experiment with dissonances, it's a lot of the time it's just because they find it interesting, and communicating that interest to other people can sometimes be tricky. Lucas Cathell writes, "The War of Art characterizes the resistance really well. Really interesting book. Check it out if you haven't. I'll definitely check that out. Thank you for the recommendation." Nano writes, "Is there an easy way for some to self-teach themselves music theory as someone in high school? Any books or something else you can recommend? Thanks." Music Theory from the Ground Up by Ben Levin. I think that's an important one. Reading the Wikipedia article on the Circle of Fifths. I think that's an important thing for music theory. Familiarizing yourself with the Circle of Fifths and Circle of Fifths, major scales, and diatonic chords in those major scales. I think that's very important, and I think those things you can teach yourself quite easily using any kind of resource that you find online. I don't have any specific resources besides Ben's channel. And, you know, a bunch of people have their basics, their building blocks. I know 12-tone has a basic building blocks sort of thing, like the Basic Music Theory series. I need to develop one for myself, but that just keeps getting pushed back. Anyway, major scale. Luke O'Hagan. Any thoughts on Jacob Collier's new track, With the Love in My Heart? More generally, his enormous DeJesse project. Yeah, With the Love in My Heart's a really fun song because he kind of threw everything in the kitchen sink in there. It's like every time he releases a new track, it's like a new manifesto on what it means to be Jacob Collier. I like it. I mean, you have this like 9/16 sort of vamp going on top of this septuplet swing or implied septuplet swing. Or it's a quintuplet swing in the beginning, but then it turns into a septuplet swing with like this crazy funk fusion thing. It's fun. I'm very excited to see what Jacob Collier does with this project. Davey Covers writes, as a metal guitarist trying to learn theory with a really small background knowledge, what books would you recommend? So that's the tricky thing, because everybody keeps asking me to recommend books, and I'm not sure if I can really recommend anything specifically. I know Music Theory for Dummies was pretty good, because I didn't learn music theory from a book specifically. I had music teachers. My original bass teacher and my piano teacher taught me a lot of the basics, so I didn't learn from any specific book. And I haven't been teaching music theory, the beginning music theory, out of a book ever. I really have just given people, when I've studied with me, just written stuff out for them, on sheets. So I'm sorry if I can't give a specific book to check out. I really need to give a better recommendation. But in terms of YouTube videos, again, Ben Levin's series, Music Theory from the Ground Up, and I know 12-Tone has a similar series as well. So I apologize if I cannot give you a more direct answer to that. Great. Isn't lo-fi hip-hop just new age smooth jazz? It certainly is. If you like lo-fi hip-hop, you like smooth jazz. And one of the things that I know will not age well is lo-fi hip-hop. Or maybe it will age well. I don't know. It will be very much emblematic of the times. The same way that dubstep was emblematic of the early 2010s. And like, I don't know, synth pop was emblematic of the 80s. Lo-fi hip-hop will... that sound will be of this era. Same thing with trap. I think trap will age better, though. I don't know. Oh my God, you're alive. I've been watching you for the past month and you dig your videos. Thank you so much. Did Rick Beato copy you? Yes, he did, but I've copied him like plenty of times. We all copy each other. It's fine. Could you compose in the classical style if forced as a jazz musician? For sure. I can compose in the classical style, I guess. I mean, classical is a wide term. I haven't really written anything in sonata. Well, actually, I have. So at Berkeley, I took, you're supposed to take what at the time was called tonal harmony, or traditional harmony, I think. And I took a class on like composing in like the 19th style romantic piano. I think at the end we had to write a piano sonata. Yeah, we had to write a piano sonata. So yeah, I've composed a lot like that. I also took a class in fugue writing, taught by Yakov Gubanov, who was one of Shostakovich's last students. And I didn't realize the significance of who he was when I was taking this class, but I learned some basics of fugal writing from one of Shostakovich's last students, which is obviously like super cool for me. Yeah, I did a video called How to Write a Canon early in my YouTube career. So, yep. So what happened to your forehead? Yes, I've mentioned this a bunch of times. Cut my head on a tree, believe it or not. Thanks again. Tips for teaching music to others, whether in a formal setting, just helping out your bandmates. You're awesome. Don't get frustrated if people don't understand what it is that you're trying to teach them on the first go. Try and explain the same concept in different ways and demonstrate whatever you're doing on your instrument so that they can hear it. I don't really know. I'm not formally taught in teaching because I know there's a lot of formal methods of teaching, and I'm definitely not formally taught that way. But I have, I have a fair amount of experience both privately and, of course, now on this internet digital thing of teaching. Anyway, so guys, I think I'm going to sign off now. I very much appreciate everybody who did the super chat stuff, but thank you for listening. This turned a little bit less from a rant about Whiplash and more into just like a Q&A. Samurai Guitarist asks, can you teach me how to take a bass on the New York City subway? Very carefully. But thank you so much for watching, guys. I started angrier. I started very upset about Whiplash, and now I'm quite happy because people are not talking about Whiplash. We've been talking about other stuff. All right. Until next time, everybody.